This is a third grade language arts lesson called Cause and Effect, Flat Paper Flight. It is part one of a two-part series, and it's been utilized for language arts, but it also could be easily utilized for science with engineering and design, because it really dives into the four forces of flight. So lesson one kind of introduces the four forces of flight, and then lesson two really gets into the cause and effect of what happens when you start changing the four forces of flight. So the objective for this lesson is we will be able to identify the four forces of flight. So it starts off with a discussion. Have you ever flown in an airplane? And this is just a simple yes or no poll. It can be sent out to students, and then ideally the class will discuss their different experiences. The next card is just some background information about airplanes and how long they've been around, and the Wright brothers and the first airplane. The next card is a true or false poll. Paper airplanes fly using the same science as the Wright brothers, as the Wright Flyer and modern day airplanes. So is this true or false? I think most kids would probably be surprised to know that the answer is true. All airplanes need the same things to fly. Even you can build an airplane that flies. So hopefully at this point the kids are hooked. They want to know how they can do that, how they can build an airplane. So the next part, we get into the instruction and practice section, and we start discussing what does an airplane need to be able to fly. So this is a word seed poll, and when students submit their poll responses, they will come in as short text responses, just a couple of words, kind of like a brainstorming idea. So you'll see everyone's ideas on the card all at the same time. So hopefully this really gets the wheels turning. And then on the next card, we actually learn what airplanes need to fly. So all airplanes depend on the same four forces of flight: lift, thrust, weight, and drag. And so we have a visual here showing lift, thrust, weight, and drag. And then we're going to pull the little tab to show a definition of force, just in case they need it. The next card is a video from NASA that just really dives into the four forces of flight and explains it thoroughly. This provides lots of visuals and just makes it more concrete for the kids. And then the next card is a follow-up to that, where we review each of the different four forces. And each definition has kind of a pull tab to further explain and compare them to each other, because it can be difficult to differentiate. Okay, and so then that's followed with a practice activity. So now that they know what the four forces of flight are and how each one works, they're going to drag and label each of the four forces of flight. And then they can use the arrows to also label. Oh. So these are clone-on drag arrows. And that way they can label each direction. So anyway, once they have finished this little activity, that's going to be followed up with a multiple choice question. Which force of flight is the most important? And then after they've submitted their poll responses, the teacher can pull the tab to reveal that the answer is E. All four forces of flight are important. And then as a closure to this section, we have a little discussion question here about how the four forces of flight work in a paper airplane, because the next lesson really gets into paper airplanes. They're going to be building their own paper airplane and learning how to manipulate the forces of flight in their own airplanes. So which forces of flight do you see at work? Label each picture and explain your reasoning. So this is the teacher card that goes with the student card. This is just kind of a closure activity. So they're going to label each of these pictures as showing lift, thrust, weight, or drag, and then explain why they labeled them the way they did. And then at the end we just have a little glossary, since this is a lesson that's full of science terminology. And that's the end of part 1. So now we're going to switch over to this tab here where I have lesson 2. So the objective for part 2 is we will be able to explain how changing the steps for building a paper airplane affects the 4 forces of flight. So this lesson starts out with a discussion question. Do you think you can change the 4 forces of flight to make a paper airplane fly better? How? So this is a simple yes/no question, and then they're going to expand upon their answer, with an explanation of how. And then we're going to pull these tabs to kind of show that in each picture, you can change the 4 forces of flight by building it, by the way you build it, or by the way you throw it. Okay, so now we have a vocabulary card introducing cause and effect. What we just learned about on this card demonstrates cause and effect. So a cause is what makes something happen, and effect is what happens because of the cause. And then we have specific examples from the previous card. If you change the way you build or throw a paper airplane, then the effect is you will change the forces of flight and it will fly differently. So now we get into the body of the lesson here. This card is kind of an introduction to the article, which is about John Collins. He has really made a career out of making paper airplanes, and he knows all kinds of tricks to build really cool paper airplanes. So the kids are going to read about him in the article, which is here. That is going to be followed with a card to discuss some vocabulary. So in the article it talks about how he uses origami to build paper airplanes, and then we're going to make a connection. Why would the sculptural tricks of origami be helpful when designing paper airplanes? So now they're really going to get into it. Put your origami paper folding skills to the test. Follow the steps to practice building the Suzanne, which was the paper airplane that John Collins built in the article. As you work, think about how each fold affects the lift, thrust, weight, and drag of the airplane. So now we're going to open up the student track, and on the student card, which the students will receive automatically, they have all of the steps to build the Suzanne. So they're going to go through each step and make their own paper airplane Suzanne. Then we're going to ask a question. What would happen if you changed a step of the building sequence? What effects could be caused by the changes that you make? So now they're just thinking about what's going to happen if I make a change here. And on the next card, we have an answer key that really discusses it. So changing the sequence would change the way the plane is built or thrown, which would change the forces of flight affecting the plane. This would change the way it flies. And it just kind of breaks it down into all of the different causes and effects that would make that one larger cause and effect. So now they're going to do a group activity. And in this activity, each group is going to change a different step in the sequence for building the Suzanne. And they're going to compare and contrast the way the planes fly, see if they fly differently, and see if they can identify which force of flight was changed by the change that they made. So group 1 is going to come up and they're going to pull their tab. This is their assignment. They're going to change step number 1. Group number 2, they're going to change step number 14 and 15. Group number 3 is going to change step number 12, and group number 4 is going to change step number 15. So again, the kids are going to get the sequence, the steps, but when they get to their specified step, they're going to make the change that they were assigned. Then they're going to fly their planes and see how the planes fly differently with the changes that have been made. And they're going to record the effects on this chart. So this activity is meant to be done whole group here because each group had a different change to make. So change step number 1, that was group number 1. So group number 1 is going to explain what happened when they made that change. Then the teacher is going to send the student card as a multiple choice poll to the whole class. And the class is going to try to identify which force of flight was changed when they made the change in the design. Okay, and then just to wrap up this section, explain how the sequence of steps developed by John Collins to build the Suzanne caused it to fly better than any other paper airplane in the world. Why is the sequence of steps so important? And then finally, as the closure to the lesson, they're going to get a little bit of background about John Collins' Kickstarter to do a national paper airplane contest. And then it kind of sets up a teacher to conduct their own paper airplane contest if they would like. So instructions are included here for conducting the paper airplane contest. And then there's a website that's embedded, which the students can go to. It's currently not working because ClassFlow is not working, but ideally the students would be able to visit the website as part of the lesson. Then they're going to go to the next card in the lesson here, which has an area where they can record their steps for the paper airplane that they built. And then the next card, they can take a picture of the paper airplane that they built. And both of those cards can be submitted as a creative response poll. And finally, just as some additional resources, I've included some more videos and files from NASA. And these are optional. A teacher can use them if they need them, but they don't have to. And then at the very end, again, we have a glossary for all the science terms. And that is it.